He was a soldier who went to war without a gun. Welcome to Lore of the Multiverse, where real stories feel like legend. If you enjoy tales of impossible survival, forgotten war heroes, and moments where humanity is tested beyond the limit, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's dive into the story of the man who defied the rules of war, stayed true to his faith, and saved lives when everyone else was taking them. This is the story of Desmond Doss, the unarmed medic of Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond Thomas Doss was born in Lynchburg, Virginia, in 1919, a quiet, God-fearing boy raised in a Seventh-day Adventist household. His childhood was shaped by a deep respect for life. A poster in his home of the Ten Commandments showed Cain holding a club over his brother Abel, and the words, "Thou shalt not kill," seared into young Desmond's memory. To him, it wasn't a suggestion, it was law. Yet by the time he was in his early 20s, the world was on fire. It was 1942, and the United States had entered World War II. Like many young men, Desmond felt compelled to serve. But unlike others, he enlisted not to take lives, but to save them. He joined the U.S. Army as a conscientious objector. Not because he didn't want to serve, he did, but because he refused to carry a weapon. He believed God had called him to be a medic, to heal rather than harm. That decision immediately made him a target, not of the enemy, but of his own comrades. In boot camp, Doss's beliefs were seen as cowardice. Soldiers mocked him, cursed him, even threw boots at him while he prayed. His commanding officers tried to have him discharged, labeling him mentally unfit. They saw him as a liability. A soldier without a weapon in the theater of war? Madness. But Doss didn't bend. "I couldn't picture Christ with a rifle," he said. "I want to be like Christ." Eventually, they let him stay. He trained, ran drills, and prepared like everyone else, minus the killing part. When it came time for deployment, Doss was assigned as a medic with the 77th Infantry Division. He would see his first real combat in Guam and Leyte in the Philippines, brutal jungles soaked in blood and rain. There, he carried the wounded through enemy fire, pulled men from exploding foxholes, and treated shattered bodies while bullets sliced the air. He earned a Bronze Star for valor. But those battles were only preludes. What cemented Desmond Doss as a legend was Hacksaw Ridge. It was April 1945. The Allies were nearing the end of their Pacific campaign. To reach mainland Japan, they had to capture Okinawa. One of the island's most fiercely defended positions was a sheer cliff called Maeda Escarpment, nicknamed Hacksaw Ridge by the Americans. To take the ridge, troops had to climb cargo nets up a 400-foot cliff face, and into the teeth of Japanese machine guns, mortars, and artillery dug into bunkers. It was a slaughterhouse. On April 29, the 77th Infantry launched an assault up the ridge. At first, it seemed the Americans had taken ground. But by nightfall, a ferocious counterattack forced them to retreat, leaving behind dozens of wounded men stranded on the escarpment, exposed and dying. Everyone withdrew. Everyone, except Desmond Doss. Alone on the ridge, unarmed, and under the shadow of Japanese positions, Doss began what can only be described as a divine act of courage. One by one, he found the wounded, some with missing limbs, some barely conscious, and dragged or carried them to the edge of the cliff. Then, using a rope-lowering system he devised with a tree stump and a knot he'd learned as a kid, he began lowering the injured down to safety, in complete darkness, under gunfire, without cover. Each time he finished with one, he prayed, "Lord, let me get one more," and he did. Again. And again. Desmond Doss stayed on Hacksaw Ridge for 12 hours. No backup. No rifle. No light. Just grit and faith. By the time the sun rose, he had rescued an estimated 75 men. Some say the number was higher. Doss himself thought it might have been 50. The army split the difference. The soldiers who once mocked him now watched in awe. One of them later said, "He was the bravest man I ever knew." Doss returned to Hacksaw in the days following, continuing his medic duties. On May 5, while treating wounded soldiers under fire, he was hit by a grenade. Shrapnel tore through his legs. Refusing evacuation, he treated himself and waited 5 hours for stretcher bearers. When they came, He gave up his spot for another wounded man. As he crawled back toward the aid station, a sniper's bullet shattered his arm. He fashioned a splint from a rifle stock, the same rifle he refused to carry into combat, and crawled 300 yards to safety. Desmond Doss survived the war. He would never fully recover from his wounds. He lost a lung to tuberculosis and suffered lifelong pain. But he gained something greater. In October 1945, President Harry Truman awarded Desmond Doss the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. Truman shook his hand and said, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." Desmond was the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. In his citation, the words are clear: through his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions, Private First Class Doss saved the lives of many soldiers. His story faded into relative obscurity for decades until it was brought to life in the 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge, directed by Mel Gibson. The film renewed global interest in Doss's legacy, but the truth, as always, is even more incredible than fiction. He never once raised a weapon in anger. Yet he left a legacy of courage and selflessness that few warriors can match. Desmond Doss died in 2006 at the age of 87. He was buried at the National Cemetery in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with full military honors. In a world where strength is often measured by violence, Desmond showed that real power lies in compassion, conviction, and the courage to stand alone, not to take lives, but to save them. His story is not just about war. It's about faith. About holding onto your principles even when the world thinks you're wrong. About walking into hell not to destroy, but to heal. It's the kind of story that reminds us what humanity is still capable of, even in its darkest hour. Thank you for watching this episode of Lore of the Multiverse. If you found Desmond's story inspiring, be sure to subscribe for more real-world legends and untold histories. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments, what other unsung heroes should we feature next? Until next time, keep seeking, keep wondering, and never underestimate the power of one.